Today, we'll take advantage of the relatively low winds to tackle Cedar Bayou in Baytown. We'll be departing from Roseland Park at 100 Roseland Drive. The park has all of the standard amenities, including restrooms, pavilions, basketball courts, playgrounds, plenty of picnic areas, and a static turn-of-the-century locomotive that railroad enthusiasts will likely appreciate. There is also ample waterfront real estate from which to fish. We'll be casting off from the park's slide launch, but there are also trailer-accessible ramps nearby. For today's trek, we'll head right, yielding to any barge propelling tugs that frequent these waters. We'll then pass under the Grand Parkway Bridge. Just a bit thereafter, those with a keen eye will spot the remnants of an old vertical lift rail bridge peeking out of the shoreline vegetation. This rail bridge sat decaying for many decades before being removed several years back. Keep around the first couple of curves. You'll then come into view of a storage tank battery at one of several industrial sites that are situated along the waterway. Bearing right with the curve will lead you past several cranes and a handful of barges that are more often than not moored at the site. Just past this facility, you'll see the intersection of an adjoining bayou that will lead into Galveston Bay, along with a couple recessed corridors that we'll explore on the way back. Keep to the course, and you'll soon arrive at a gentle curve where a vibrant tree line replaces the industrial vistas on the port side. This is what I would consider to be the most natural stretch of the course. It is also here that the waterfowl made their most substantial showing of the day. Though this route is fairly light on wildlife compared to many other coastal treks due to the commercial activities, here egrets, herons, and kingfishers soared about while a handful of brown pelicans searched for an afternoon snack. Just before the next major curve, you'll come to a small island at the entrance to a shallow cove on the right. Immediately after, you'll navigate a hairpin turn that keeps to the bayou. I will warn you to be sure to keep your ears sharp in these stretches, so as not to be surprised by a tug rounding one of the bends in relatively close proximity. Here, bounds back and forth across the bayou's width ought to be limited or done with diligence if you elect to do so. Here, the most pristine portion of this route will begin to give way to a more substantial industrial stretch. I didn't make it far past this point today due to an aquatic traffic jam of sorts, as a handful of tugs were struggling to rearrange a host of barges along a busy port section. But just for reference, if you do continue on this tract of Cedar Bayou, you'll eventually come to the more open stretch of Lake Henry Doyle and Ash Point. A short distance more and you'll arrive at the terminus of Cedar Bayou, marked by Shell Point and the glistening expanse of Galveston Bay. This portion of the waterway is an interesting addition. However, I've encountered more hazards along this stretch due to maritime industrial traffic than any other. As such, I wasn't too disappointed in foregoing this section today. Turning back here, we'll be retracing our paddle strokes once again through what I deem to be the most peaceful and picturesque leg of the trip. Following that now familiar series of turns will find us back at those sheltered corridors we passed on the way in. Though there are a few of them, only one was easily accessed in its entirety. I could see these alcoves coming in handy to take a breather on windier days. I am curious as to what these short jaunts were meant for, so if you know, please drop it below in the comments. Next, we'll bear left onto the passage that leads to Galveston Bay. This straight stretch will lead beneath Tri-City Beach Road before opening up into the bay. Here, I was greeted by several more pelicans, with a few whimsical cormorants mixed in. Across the bay, you'll see the towering cranes of the Barber's Cut terminal of the Port of Houston. Further off in the distance to the east, you'll likewise be able to make out the cranes along the Bayport Channel. To the west, you'll see the spanning silhouette of the Fred Hartman Bridge. Just a note, if you were to bear right, you would wind up among the oil rigs and pump jack platforms of Tabbs Bay. This route would be a great one-way trip if you had another vehicle waiting at Bayland Park. Do be mindful of old petroleum paraphernalia that still dot these waters at random, as you'll occasionally scrape across some old unmarked lines just beneath the surface. With that, we'll turn back to follow the western portion of Cedar Bayou back to Roseland Park, concluding a dynamic and respectable nearly 10.5-mile trek. My final impressions of the Cedar Bayou coastal route is as follows. It's a nice change of scenery on occasion, but it's not one I'd revisit often. It's not a knock on this route. It's just that we have such a plethora of amazing routes in this immediate demographic. While it's absolutely subjective, I'm not a fan of the industrial vistas in light of the ample, pristine scenery of neighboring routes. However, I imagine that some might find this facet interesting. There is one chief concern that I must voice about this route, especially to paddlers of limited experience. You are almost certainly to encounter a series of commercial craft along this route, given the many commercial sites along the way. While diligence is always a prerequisite when paddling around commercial traffic, extra care must be taken around the barges that are extremely commonplace here. These behemoths displace a lot of water at speed. I have encountered some substantial wakes here. I don't recommend attempting this one unless you're experienced and comfortable with traversing the degree of wake that these vessels can put off. While winds were fair today, the many more open tracks of this paddle make it pretty unpleasant on gusty days. Let alone how nasty the bay itself can be when it is strewn about with whitecaps. I feel like I'm being pretty hard on this route. It's not my intent, as I did enjoy my time on Cedar Bayou today. There are just some notable caveats that must be observed for a safe paddle. In reasonable conditions, this route will prove no problem to experienced paddlers. I would strongly recommend that novices don't attempt this one right off the bat, or at least have an experienced paddler at the helm. If you're comfortable with those caveats, give it a shot. Paddle safe, and God bless. Please subscribe to GCK for more great Gulf Coast outdoors content.